Welcome back from this short break. Thank you for being on time. This is our first working panel of the conference.
Closer, closer.
This is our first working panel of the conference. It's not obvious that networks should be a topic of today's conference dedicated to literary translation on the background of so many pressing other issues such as the visibility and the status of literary translators, the artificial intelligence and other issues that we have in our field. But I'm grateful to the programmers and the organizers and the hosts of this conference for having included the topic of networks and the role of networks in the contemporary European cultural scene. Because networks, I believe, are a vital part of the literary translation and the cultural ecosystem of Europe. I believe they are authentic channels for trans-border cultural cooperation, and we will hear today some examples of such platforms. Surprisingly, we don't have hard data on the number of cultural networks in Europe today, or at least I couldn't find one. But the European Commission supports in this program period some 37 pan-European networks in diverse art fields, cultural fields, and cultural heritage. European networks of today are very different by, as you can imagine, by origin, by geographical scope. Some are national, some are regional, some are trans-European or even international. They are diverse in terms of their origin, the sectors coverage. Some are trans-sectoral. We can think of Culture Action Europe or Trans-Europe Halles, which are trans-sectoral networks in culture. But there are few features of networks that I think are common for no matter their differences. And this is that networks give us access to incredible wealth of accumulated knowledge and experience and expertise from very different countries and contexts. Networks are, for their members, a source of inspiration, of good practices. Very often, sometimes they are a source of international support. Remember the ways networks have been instrumental in, at least in our field, in culture, in recent crises such as in the global pandemic or the war in Ukraine, when, for example, our network RECIT have mobilized itself rather quickly to exchange across borders as to what do we do in a pandemic situation, how do we keep on doing our programming, our events, our support for literary translations. So networks are these very authentic, I think, unique platforms where we meet to negotiate, to re-examine what's common for us, but also to renegotiate and re-examine our differences in search for, hopefully, common solutions. I'm very happy to present our speakers today. We will go on until 12:30. It's an honor to present the speakers. To your furthest left, Joris Smeets from Flanders Literature. He will be talking about the RECIT network. RECIT stands for European Network of International Translation Centers. Next to him is Andrej Lovšin, who will be talking about the TRADUKI network, a regional or more than a regional network for literary translation and publishing. To your furthest right, Alexandra Büchler, founder and director of Literature Across Frontiers. but she will be talking today about ENLIT network. ENLIT stands for European Network of International... European Network for Literary Translation. Next to her is Simina Popa, originally from Romania. She will be talking about CELA, or in some countries, as we say, CELA. A pan-European international project for literature and translation that started as a project and has recently become a European platform. Simina is, in her other life, a translator from Portuguese into Romanian. Next to me is Jörn Cambreleng, or Cambreleng, depending. Jörn is director of Atlas, the French-based Association for Literary Translation. He's also a literary translator himself and former president of RECIT network. The colleagues will present to you their work, the networks, the impact of the networks' work, I hope. Then we'll have some time for discussion. If time permits, I will also take some questions from you. So, Joris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yana. I hope everybody can understand me clearly. I, of course, also would like to thank the organizing committee from Seattle for giving us this opportunity to shed some light on these different European networks. I would also, of course, like to greet the people at home watching the live stream. As Yana said, I am Joris Smeets. I work for Flanders Literature, Flanders being the northern part of Belgium, the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. And the focus of our organization is twofold. On the one hand, we support Flemish authors, publishers, literary organizations, and of course, translators. And on the other hand, we promote Flemish literature abroad, whether by attending the big book fairs in Europe or offering translation grants to publishers to help cover translation costs. So translators are a big focus for us, not only by providing grants, inbound and outbound translation, but also we run a small residency program for translators. We've been doing this now for more than 10 years. It's a small residence. I believe we are the smallest member of the RECIT network, but it's a very cozy apartment in a lovely area of Antwerp, so I invite all of you to apply to stay there. And this residency is, of course, what connects Flanders literature to the RECIT network. I have the privilege of being the vice president of this European network of literary translation centers. As you can see, here are some examples of these often very wonderfully located residencies. We are a network that whose roots can be traced back to the end of the 70s, when the residency center in Strahlen, which you see at the bottom left for you, became a model for other European countries. And during the 90s, the idea of creating a more formal network of this kind of translation residencies came into being, and since then, RECIT has grown to be a organization with 17 members across 15 countries. Of course, what unites these centers is that they are all open to hosting literary professionals, especially translators. But needless to say, they are, of course, also very unique in their own respects. As I mentioned, we are quite a small residency. Strahlen is much bigger. The locations are also, of course, different in big cities or more in the countryside. The requirements for admission are, of course, also quite diverse. So in that way, it is those residencies are really a reflection of the cultural and linguistic diversity of our continent. Well, as you probably all know, literary professionals are always very busy. Running a residency is more than a full-time job. So why are people still taking the time to invest in a network? Of course, needless to say, it's a wonderful platform for exchange. It gives you the opportunity to meet with peers, and it's really a way of putting this idea of a shared cultural European space into action. And this is really happening every year, for example, at our General Assembly, which gives us the opportunity to visit a new center every year. And as Yana mentioned, especially in difficult times, for example, during the pandemic or the situation in Ukraine, many online meetings were organized between the members to share experience about how to get through those difficult times. I think the network functions very well, and of course there are still opportunities to strengthen it, because I believe that networks do not only benefit members themselves, but they can also benefit policymakers. I think Arnaud just launched a call to ENLIT. I think this goes for all networks. I mean, strong networks can be good partners for policy and vice versa, so it works both ways, and I think there are still some steps to be made in that direction. Next slide, please. One way of strengthening our network was engaging in a large-scale project with the help of funding of Creative Europe called Translation in Motion. It really is an example of what a network can achieve. And this project was only possible because the network was already in place, so it makes it much easier to move from a good idea to concrete action. And that's what happened with Translation in Motion. The main goal was to involve 9 translator residencies in different countries to promote the circulation of books, especially with smaller languages. The focus was really on the Western Balkans. So there was a residency, an exchange program put in place, workshops were organized at a different location, and it really helped to integrate the partners in the Western Balkans into this larger network of European translation residencies. One of the outcomes of this Translation in Motion project was a mapping exercise. Next slide, please. This I mentioned here, you see the different partners engaged in the translation project. Next slide, please. I mentioned already the kind of activities that took place within the framework of Translation in Motion. So next slide, please. These are some footage of the activities that took place in Albania, Northern Macedonia, Belgrade, and so on. But I would like to finish with mentioning the mapping exercise that was done. So next slide, please. I have an example of this here. This is the first time an effort was made to bring together online in a database, but also in this publication, an overview of all the residencies in Europe. So not only the members of the RECIT network, but all of them. I believe there are 51 of them. So I would highly recommend for you to have a look at our website to see what opportunities there are across the continent. There are some brochures here at the table, unfortunately not enough for all of you. But it really gives you a window on the residency opportunities in our continent. And then lastly, I would like to mention the handbook that came out of this Translation in Motion project. Next slide, please. Which is like a pager of 25 pages. that gathers all kinds of information on how to run workshops, industry sessions, and how you can organize them in terms of finances, etc., etc. So also a strong encouragement to go and have a look at the website of RECIT, where you can find all of these interesting materials. Thank you.
Thank you, Joris. Thank you, Joris. Yes, it's these two tangible, very tangible materials, I hope will be useful for the years to come as a result of Translation in Motion. And I use the opportunity to thank all of you. Some of you here in this room have actually contributed to the translation workshops handbook and to the mapping, so thank you for your contribution. It wasn't an individual effort, it was really a collective pan-European effort. Andrej Lovšin for TRADUKI.
Thank you, Yana, for this introduction, and of course I join in thanking the organizers, the CEATL organization, for organizing this wonderful event, bringing together so many different people, all somehow passionate about translation. I must say, when the title was published of this panel, it was very suitable because TRADUKI is moving books since many years. We made a fun illustration for some art of our previous presentations, and I ask for the next slide, please. Yep. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is our work, moving books from A to B and C. We are on the move, our network, since 2008, so it's been 16 years. And probably I will outline how it started, because I think these ideas in the beginning kind of still keep us moving today. Next slide, please. So the network started when 3 German-speaking countries decided to do something together, a project on translation support, and they joined Pro Helvetia, Kulturkontakt Austria, and Goethe-Institut from Germany to support translations in Southeastern Europe. From the beginning, it was also a political project, and still is, so that's why also foreign ministries of Austria and Germany are involved. And there is the private foundation from Berlin, as Fischer Stiftung, and that's why the network is Berlin-based. We have our seat at the S. Fischer Stiftung headquarters. The area of Southeastern Europe was chosen as, in the early and late 2000s, this was still seen as a conflict region, a crisis region, but we wanted to show that it's much more than that it has a very rich literary scene and tradition. So twofold, this is one aspect, and the other is also to help to reestablish, to restore this lost cooperation that was ongoing before the events of the 90s. We have to imagine that as late as 2001 there was still armed conflict in the region. And this project was cooperation on eye level since the beginning with German-speaking countries and with partners from Southeastern Europe. At the core of the project was and still is translation and translation support. Translation also gave the network its name. So TRADUKI means translate in Esperanto. Our motto is translations from, to, and within Southeastern Europe. This means we subsidize translation in all directions, not just one direction. And our mission statement, I will have to read it. TRADUKI aims to foster exchange in the realm of fiction, contemporary non-fiction, as well as children's and youth literatures among these countries, and in particular support translators, publishers, librarians, critics, and scientists to stimulate cooperation and exchange of information amongst participants. So this description is actually what we do, And we do this by means of translation support, events that we do, either supported or our own events, and we support mobility, mostly authors, translators as well. We have supported until now 1,570 titles, literary works. Next slide, please. So a lot of books. There are 105 language combinations possible within TRADUKI. 50% of them are translations from German. This is the most strongest represented directions into languages of Southeastern Europe. 35% are translations within those languages that are spoken and used in Southeastern Europe, and 10% are translations into German from languages of Southeastern Europe. Over 1,400 books have been published yet until today. And we want to move these books to the audience. That's why we do events, promotions, other events. And one of our, or the most important platform for us is the Leipzig Book Fair in Germany, where we bring 20 to 40 authors each year. We have a very rich program there, so if you are in Leipzig, you will find TRADUKI very prominently represented. Still, our work is based on the same principles as it was as we were funded. Our network has grown. Official members of the network are now 18 members from 14 countries. What I learned myself working for TRADUKI in the last 14 years is our setup has created a sustainable network, so we are not dependent on outside financing, but members of the network finance all the activities of the network. So we don't have to apply for outside funding. We have an agreement that is open-end now. It was prolonged every 2 years before. We are flexible in response to also last-minute requests, which might be counterintuitive because we are a network of 18 partners, but we have noticed we can react much faster than a national support program can, which is strictly bound to regulations, to laws. We are kind of flexible in that way. And one last aspect is that this network, working together with partners for many years, eventually or sooner or later develops into trust. So there is a high level of trust among partners in the network. I want to conclude with another statement, because there is also the S. Fischer Stiftung, which I mentioned before, who is actually the spiritus agens of this network. They were the ones who launched these negotiations to create the network, and they are still giving us values. I mean, they instilled values into our network, which is respect for cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, solidarity, reconciliation, which was very important for Southeastern Europe, tolerance, and I didn't mention enough how important for our work are translators, because we see that none of this that we strive for, none of these buzzwords are possible without the work of translators, who are the single most important cultural mediators. So yeah, that would be my closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrej. Maybe afterwards in the discussion, we can also talk about another not just the funding, but another very useful service that TRADUKI is providing, and that is the database of translators in the Balkans. But for now, let's move on with Alexandra Büchler of ENLIT. Alexandra, please.
Thank you, Yana, and thank you all for the invitation to be here. It's a great pleasure and honor, and this is what we usually say, but I really mean it, because it's an honor to represent a European network, being the director of an organization which is based in the UK. I'll just say a few words about Literature Across Frontiers so that you understand where we're coming from. LAF was founded more than 20 years ago with support from the European Union through the Culture Programme and then the Creative Europe Programme. And of course then came the terrible blow called Brexit. So I should also say that we are based in a part of the UK, which is special because it is officially bilingual and it's Wales. So we have a kind of sensitivity, enhanced sensitivity towards bilingualism, multilingualism, language equality, etc. And I'd like to say, and this will be the end of my digression, that there is a word in Welsh, it's hireth, and it is difficult. It is one of those words that are difficult to translate. You remember yesterday there was a discussion over the title Physics of Sorrow by Georgi Gospodinov. The whole discussion was very stimulating, really enjoyable. But how do you translate these words? And they are often about nostalgia, melancholy, sadness. Well, this word is actually translated, this is one of the translations, homesickness, longing for a home to which one cannot return. So this is how we feel about our relationship to Europe. At the moment, things may change in the future. And so I'd like to say, here we are across the channel, waving, not drowning. And there has been a kind of mobilization of the cultural sector now with the new government, where we have a hope that things will change in terms of resetting our relationship. Now, ENLIT, it's a relatively new network, but it's also not so new because it was originally decided back in, and can I have the next slide, please? Okay, yes, one thing I need to point out is, this is a picture from about 2 years ago at the Frankfurt Book Fair. Translation is female. We could see it yesterday with the translators of the work of a major male author. They were all female, and these are the people who take care of translation. So next slide, please. What is ENLIT? It's a network of non-profit independent organizations, and what we mean by independent is arm's length, in the kind of Anglo-Saxon sense of the word, that you are removed from the seat of power and from the government, so that hopefully there is not no political interference, but of course you have to work with the government on achieving certain goals. ENLIT is extremely important because it provides the funding for translation, and so it contributes to a dynamic, diverse and easily accessible literary landscape. It contributes to literary diversity across Europe, and I have to say that because we are represented here with quite a few members, no fewer than 5 speaking, and there are others in the audience, and so I could literally hear the collective gasp of consternation when Arno said that The Commission wants to talk to ENLIT, but it doesn't know how. Well, yes, invite us, please. We're here, we have the collective knowledge, we have the figures, which I won't be referring to because my colleague Julia Florit will talk about that. And we are very keen to talk to you and to share our knowledge. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of the story because the network really grew out of efforts to bring these organizations together. Actually, the first partners of Literature Across Frontiers in its European projects were usually representatives or by organizations that support mobility and translation. And the Frankfurt Book Fair also deserves a word of thanks because they have offered a space for us to meet. And so it's a kind of combination of the commercial space, but of course Frankfurt is the book fair with a soul. And it's not only commercial, it has a number of functions which support the cultural exchange. And LAF brought together the first founding members back in 2012. So then the network was launched at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2016, and eventually it was launched as ENLIT. It had a kind of funny name before, which I won't refer to here, as we were kind of looking, to establish ourselves. Next slide, please. So here you have some numbers. There are 29 members in 22 sovereign countries, and I stress this because, of course, sovereign countries have regions or autonomous regions that where a language is spoken which may not be the main national language. As I referred to Wales, it's an officially bilingual country, everything is bilingual, and Welsh is very widely spoken. So we have, for instance, a very active member from Catalonia, and there are other countries which are bilingual or multilingual. So we can say that the members support outbound translation from 34 European languages, and I hope I made this calculation correctly. What's interesting about this statement is that this is only about supporting outbound translation, and it was mentioned several times here that institutions such as these that are members of ENLIT, actually some of them support also inbound translation. This is very important, and I will be referring to this later. Next slide, please. What we have in common, I won't go down all the bullet points, but essentially, and I think that's where kind of the power of this network lies, the members contribute very strongly to policy formulation in their countries, and they are the fund givers rather than receivers of funding. Of course, they have to be funded by their governments, but their function is to give grants and to support the whole value chain, also in terms of mobility and, of course, in terms of circulation of literary works. So I think that's where really we have a lot to common. A lot to contribute with what we have in common, and how we benefit is that we discuss our practice, we discuss our policies, and we learn from one another. So we share this knowledge. We meet twice a year, and we have one digital meeting as well. And so these meetings are really important for sharing the knowledge. We also have working groups that look at specific issues. Next slide, please. I know. Yeah. And And this is, stealing the motto, the slogan, translation moves Europe, and ENLIT moves translation. So, as I said, we contribute to literary diversity, and we have a lot to offer with our comprehensive collective knowledge. And I think this was the last slide. I produced this some time ago, and yes, thank you on behalf of ENLIT.
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. As it was already mentioned here in this room, I bet everybody is a member of some network. Some of us are members of more than one network, of ENLIT, of RECIT, but also of other networks that are not present here on stage. Simina, please tell us about CELA project and how it grew from a European project to a real platform and a network.
Hello, thank you for having the CELA project over here. I was thinking if it's a young project or not. I'm not sure. Listening to the different presentations, I would say it's young in spirit anyway, and most importantly it addresses the young generation of creators, of literary creators, which means translators and writers on one hand, and on the other hand it involves cultural institutions from different countries. So CELA stands for Connecting Emerging Literary Artists, but usually it's funnier to just remember CELA and then try to come up with your own version, as it usually happens even between the partners who sometimes forget what the C is for or what the L is for or so on. And it is designed as a talent development program, and it encompasses a very wide role involving from emerging writers, emerging translators, and cultural workers, from mentorship to project management. The project started in 2017 with the first edition, which lasted for 2 years, and it's co-funded by the Creative Europe program, and now it's in the 3rd edition. Usually, when presenting what the project is about and what is CELA, it takes about a page long and a lot of minutes because it's a very complex and layered project. So, and this is a reason enough for CELA to try to keep it interesting so people get past the introduction and to the actual content. So, next slide, please. Yes, great. This is the slide where I would like to introduce to the partners of the current edition, which started this year in 2024. It's quite fresh. It lasts for 4 years until 2027, and there are 11 countries involved in this third edition, and each and every one of the partners you see here make the CELA project. They represent the partnership. So I would begin with Wintertuin, which is from Netherlands and is the main coordinator and the founder of the project. From Belgium, there is De Buren and Passaporta. Italy is participating through Scuola Hoden. Spain through Escuela de Escritores. Slovenia through the Goga Publishing House. The Czech Republic through CECLIT, Poland through the Krakow Bureau Festival, Serbia with the Crocodile Association, and Bulgaria with the Next Page Foundation, Ukraine with Book Arsenal, and Romania, where I come from, has 2 partners, the Natural Literature Museum from Iași and the Translators Association where I am from. So each partner contributes to the project, first with the staff team to coordinate all the activities that are going on. Each partner from each country selects 3 emerging writers and then has to find translators for all the other participating languages in the project. And this is where the project has these 2 main levels, so the back office networking between all of these institutions that you see here, and then the front office networking, which is the participants, the emerging writers and the emerging translators that work among themselves. And of course, the CELA project has been scanning the cultural environment in each of these countries for this young generation of creators and cultural workers as well. One of the premises of the project being, of course, read in your own language and know your neighbors. And of course, all the benefits of the networks have been exposed and will be exposed in what comes next. And I believe that they are a factor that keep the cultural sector quite healthy. They are that apple a day which keeps the doctor away. So next slide, please. How does the program work? It has 2 cycles which are identical. Each cycle has 2 parts. The first part is training the participants, the translators and the writers. The second part is going out with them on a tour to promote them, to present them to publishers first and to the public second. The first year is to get to know each other, to set the details, the calendars, the content, and each country designs their own offer of training and of workshops. And this makes the things, of course, all the more interesting because you have offers. The participants can sign up for workshops from any other country, and they can choose from audience design to their cultural and social mission as creators, or to classic and tech-oriented approaches to being creative. In the training part, the focus for the translators and the writers are employability, translation, of course, and promotion strategies. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just to illustrate what it means for a writer on one hand and what it means for a translator on the other hand to be in the project. You can see a lot of numbers here, of course, but they are easy to find usually. In the second year of the project, each country holds a public event where they showcase basically their national team of young translators and the invited writers, and they try to reach the publishing market and to pitch this new generation of creators to the publishers. And also a big plus is that, writers and translators have on the CELA website their own page of presentation with a mini bio, a photo, a sample text of translation, a contact. So it's also been creating a database in these past 7 years of a large corpus, let's say. Next slide, please. The platform that Yana was also mentioning is actually a spin-off of the CELA project. So the CELA project is continuing business as usual, and the platform will be a new project, also co-funded, which will focus mainly on the translated book as a product. So it will showcase, after the bridge to the publishers has been filled through the CELA project, then the CELA platform comes to get to the readers, because the readership is also one of the issues that the CELA project is trying to address, encouraging also the young generation of readers through a lot of approaches, as you can see there, to get to their new thinkers, to their new voices. And the last slide, thank you. Yes, this is the map that keeps us connecting. I would say the CELA project would have two kind of results. You have the fast results on one hand, which surely begin with the social dimension, that human aspect that every network brings, and which is crucial actually for keeping us all inspired. The professional networking and the professional improvements that all these good practices and collaboration between all the partners bring. And one of the participants said that what CELA generates is not easily measured, not easily quantifiable. And generates is a good term because CELA, as other networks, I suppose, as well, mean a long-term process. So it's a network that must keep moving, and the results will appear in time. Maybe they won't appear this year or next year. Maybe they can appear in 3 or 4 years. But it's crucial that in the background, this networking keeps going, so people can have the opportunity. And then, so these are the slow results. And also, of course, as you have seen through the partners, it focuses on the rare language combinations, because it's not easy for these translators to find the motivation to get to be a translator of a rare language combination. And it fosters their interest and keeps them also, it comforts their time and effort that they invest for a rare language combination. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Simina. And particularly, I would want to stress something that Simina just mentioned, that networks are very often about the people and their motivation to invest in these networks, because it doesn't really come naturally. We are all usually in our local, national contexts, and going out in international work and networking costs additional energy, additional resources. So we have to be aware of that when praising the networking. And also thank you for stressing that very often the results of this work are not visible straight away. They are there is a longue durée, there is a long-term impact that you don't see immediately sometimes. Jörn will be our last speaker for this morning, and then I will open for question. Jörn, please.
Merci beaucoup, Yana. Pour changer un peu, je vais parler en français. Voilà, je remercie grandement toutes les organisatrices et les organisateurs de cette manifestation, qui est quand même une réussite incroyable de vous voir aussi nombreux devant nous. Je vais commencer donc par vous dire que j'ai été présenté comme directeur d'Atlas, ce que je suis certes, mais je viens ici parler d'Archipelagos, qui est un projet donc international et qui s'inscrit dans ce débat sur les réseaux. Un projet qui est le fruit d'une expérience que nous avons menée au niveau d'Atlas au préalable, qui s'appelait Levée d'encre, ENCRES. Bon courage aux interprètes en cabine pour essayer de le traduire. Et fruit d'une expérience et d'une conviction qui nous a porté à définir ce projet. Alors, je rends hommage, quand j'ai commencé à expliquer le projet au moment de sa conception, à ma collègue suisse, Gabriela Stöckli, qui a résumé beaucoup mieux que je n'avais réussi à le faire ce projet en disant bah oui, c'est un projet qui combine deux idées, le soutien à la biodiversité, donc ça c'est ce qui nous occupe ici beaucoup, et à un soutien également à une activité invisible et non rémunérée des traducteurs littéraires qui est l'activité de découverte, d'exploration de littérature et qui sont bien souvent, ça a été mentionné au cours des débats déjà par Xavier Nord ce matin, des apporteurs de projets. Alors, pour trouver un terme qui corresponde à cette volonté de renforcer les capacités des traducteurs à agir sur la circulation des œuvres et donc sur le monde, je proposerais volontiers puisqu'il y a empowerment en anglais, mais je proposerais volontiers un terme assez peu usité encore en français, mais qui est l'agentivation. Voilà, on pourrait appeler ça comme ça, je lance ça, et puis on verra bien si ce terme a une fortune ou pas. Je vais donc aussi dire, puisque je parle après ma collègue à ma gauche qui a parlé du projet CELA, que c'est un projet qui est très complémentaire à mes yeux avec le projet CELA, puisque d'ailleurs nous avons quelques partenaires en commun, CECLIT et NextPage. Je reviendrai là-dessus, et c'est un point commun parce que nous avons aussi une structure de site qui va être évolutive et qui va créer une sorte de base de données. Et nous agissons effectivement, mais nous agissons sur un public différent, puisque CELA s'adresse, ça a été dit, aux acteurs de la traduction qui sont émergents, alors que nous nous adressons à tous les traducteurs, et en particulier aux traducteurs confirmés, qui ont déjà une vue plus large, disons, des littératures qu'ils sont amenés à traduire, et qui donc sont force de proposition, ce qui n'est pas forcément le cas quand on est tout au début de sa carrière. Pourquoi ce titre, Archipelagos? Déjà, ça a été dit, on a une situation où, par exemple, en France, au niveau de la traduction littéraire, ce sont 75% des titres qui sont traduits de l'anglais, donc on va s'intéresser à renforcer les 25%, et on a essayé de prendre un terme qui ne serait pas forcément anglo-saxon, mais qui serait compris d'une façon universelle. Donc voilà, il suffisait de rajouter à Archipelago un S pour que ce soit grec, et en tout cas au nominatif, et c'est ce que nous avons fait. Mais bon, ça c'est une raison qui ne suffit pas. Nous avons également choisi ce terme parce que ça définit une sorte d'espace discontinu qui est caractérisé par sa cohésion et aussi caractérisé par des liens importants entre les différents éléments isolés. C'est un chapelet d'îles. C'est quelque chose qui, dans une lecture ancienne, dans une anthologie littéraire sur l'histoire de l'idée d'Europe, m'avait frappé, puisque la préface de cette anthologie était intitulée « L'archipel et la péninsule », ce qui décrit à la fois la géographie de la Grèce, mais aussi la géographie de l'Europe, et ça me paraissait donc tout à fait approprié. C'est un projet qui s'appuie sur... Alors on peut avoir le slide suivant, s'il vous plaît, qui s'appuie sur plusieurs... Ah oui, alors après le titre, il y a le sous-titre, donc faire émerger d'autres voix en français, Raising the Unseen Stories en allemand, en anglais, et pour chaque partenaire, en fait, nous avons laissé, comme on le fait souvent dans l'édition, une possibilité de traduction très libre et d'interprétation même du titre. C'est une façon de travailler que nous avons choisie, c'est-à-dire qu'aussi chacun des partenaires apportent dans une proposition générale ses spécificités et que nous ne soyons pas trop normatifs. Slide suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, donc de quoi s'agit-il? Je l'ai dit, alors de mettre au jour la diversité linguistique de la littérature européenne en s'appuyant sur plusieurs actions. Il y a plusieurs branches que nous avons développées, branches d'action. La première, c'est de renforcer donc les capacités à découvrir des textes des traducteurs littéraires en s'appuyant sur leur expertise. Pourquoi renforcer? Parce que c'est une activité qu'ils ont pour la plupart, en particulier dans les domaines qui ne sont pas anglo-saxons, où là, l'échange de droits se fait très souvent entre éditeurs à Francfort ou ailleurs. Donc ce renforcement, il est essentiel parce que ce sont bien souvent eux qui apportent les projets, mais ça n'est ni vu, ni su, ni rémunéré. C'est là que nous intervenons parce que nous avons pensé qu'il était absolument essentiel, dans un moment où les revenus parfois annexes des traducteurs sont fortement mis en cause avec le développement de l'intelligence artificielle, de trouver un complément de revenus qui puisse à terme être une véritable ressource de leur métier et de le trouver à l'endroit où ils travaillent jusque-là gratuitement. C'est donc une sorte d'exemplarité que nous voulions mettre en place, vertueuse, qui puisse inciter un certain nombre de politiques publiques à suivre cet exemple. Mais nous nous adressons donc aux traducteurs littéraires, mais pas seulement. Nous nous adressons également aux libraires, aux bibliothécaires et aux éditeurs, qui sont bien sûr les destinataires finaux des propositions de traduction qui vont émerger à travers le projet. La structuration du projet fait que nous avons porté une attention particulière pour ces publics-là, pour les libraires, bibliothécaires et éditeurs, à l'apport de littérature dite pudiquement de moindre diffusion sur les plus grands marchés européens, en l'occurrence la France, l'Allemagne et l'Espagne. Je vous donne un exemple. Alors voilà le slide qui détaille ça. Je commence pour poursuivre ma phrase, par les bibliothécaires, libraires et éditeurs. Je vous donne l'exemple de ce qu'on propose en France, une série de webinaires dont le premier a lieu aujourd'hui même à 15h, mais vous serez occupé autrement, mais il sera rediffusé, pour présenter aux libraires et bibliothécaires la littérature lituanienne traduite en français, dans l'idée d'inciter quelques libraires qui voudraient étoffer un rayon ou le monter, et de les aiguiller dans la connaissance d'une littérature qu'ils connaissent mal. Nous allons continuer cette série de webinaires pour leur faire découvrir la littérature ukrainienne, polonaise, tchèque, les littératures arabes, la littérature catalane, et j'en oublie malheureusement une, mais il y a 7 webinaires qui constitueront comme ça des rendez-vous réguliers en partenariat avec l'école de la librairie qui est située près de Paris à Maison-Alfort. Ensuite, nous aurons un rendez-vous à l'été prochain qui sera une université d'été consacrée à la présentation des différentes littératures étrangères et qui réunira la profession. L'inscription, enfin la réaction à cette proposition est très, très encourageante. Nous avons déjà entre 150 et 200 libraires inscrits pour venir participer à ces webinaires. Ce qui va être proposé aux traducteurs littéraires, ce sont de nombreuses opportunités. Il y a plus de 100 semaines de résidence et 10 ateliers pour échanger entre pairs qui réuniront en tout plus de 150 traducteurs. Chaque année, un appel à candidature est lancé. Le premier appel à candidature a eu lieu au début de 24. Les résidences sont encore en cours. Les premiers résultats sont sur le site. Nous avons déjà 6 portfolios qui sont présentés avec les portraits des traducteurs sur notre site. À la fin de ma présentation, vous aurez un lien pour aller voir le site et vous pourrez effectivement aussi récupérer ce lien sur des petites cartes de visite imprimées ad hoc qui sont sur la table à côté de ce podium. Voilà, je voudrais encore dire qu'il y a dans les branches d'activité quelques rendez-vous publics, car le public n'est pas oublié parmi nos destinataires et il est bien sûr toujours dans notre focus d'élargir la conscience linguistique, comme ça a été dit, en mettant en avant et sur scène les traducteurs littéraires. Slide suivant, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, alors les partenaires, j'en ai cité 2, il y en a d'autres, slide suivant. Voilà, donc ça, c'est la localisation du partenaire pilote. Slide suivant. Je vais passer très vite. Nous en avons. Alors, nous sommes 8 partenaires de plein exercice. C'est un projet de coopération à moyenne échelle, soutenu donc par Europe Créative. Et les 8 partenaires en question sont situés. Alors, il y en a 2 en France. Nous travaillons avec l'IREMO, qui est l'Institut de recherche et d'études sur le Maghreb et le Moyen-Orient. Ce partenaire est le partenaire ad hoc pour les littératures arabes. Nous avons un partenaire en Espagne, A7, ACEO Traductores. Nous avons le Lettrage Colloquium Berlin. Nous avons le Collegium Europei Wschodniej en Pologne, CEATL, ça a été dit, Next Page à Sofia en Bulgarie, et l'Institut du livre ukrainien. Slide suivant, s'il vous plaît, auquel s'ajoute l'Institut culturel à Vilnius en Lituanie, l'Institut Ramon Llull à Barcelone, et en France, l'école de la librairie que j'ai citée tout à l'heure, et l'Agence régionale du livre qui nous aide à développer notre réseau en direction des bibliothèques. Slide suivant. Voilà, je continue simplement en citant, en revenant sur cet appel à candidature pour 2025. Il est en cours jusqu'au 9 octobre, donc pendant une semaine encore. Et bon, nous avons l'habitude que les candidatures arrivent toujours au dernier moment, mais je profite quand même de cette tribune pour vous encourager à diffuser auprès de tous vos réseaux l'information. Même en une semaine, on peut faire une candidature, il n'y a pas d'extrait de traduction à produire, il y a juste à produire une intention de recherche. Je vais vous donner quelques exemples parmi les candidats. J'ai regardé les 6 portfolios qui sont en ligne actuellement et quels ont été leurs projets de recherche. Et leurs résultats ont d'ailleurs parfois divergé de ces projets de recherche, mais ce n'est pas grave. Les projets de recherche qui étaient mentionnés, une traductrice polonaise, Katarzyna Marczewska, avait pour projet au Salon du Livre de Paris d'explorer les littératures de la francophonie. Une autre traductrice, c'était plutôt sur la question des auteurs émergents, avec un critère générationnel. Et par exemple, Lola Mazelbas, qui est une jeune traductrice de l'arabe, avait pour projet d'explorer le catalogue d'une maison d'édition de littérature arabe qui est basée à Milan et qui a trouvé de la littérature libyenne. Tout ça entre dans notre projet. Dionys de Crevel a exploré la jeune poésie catalane. Vous voyez que ça peut partir dans des directions assez diverses. Cette diversité, elle est aussi au cœur de notre projet. Il suffit d'avoir donc un projet d'exploration qui soit assez défini et convaincant. Nous avons eu l'année dernière, pour la première édition, et c'était un véritable succès, 212 candidatures. Nous avons pu retenir une 50aine seulement. Nous avons encore 2 sessions. Une session qui est donc actuellement mise au concours, et puis une autre dernière session qui aura lieu en 2026. J'en ai fini. Merci Yana. C'est juste pour. J'ai encore d'autres choses à dire, mais je laisse la place à la discussion parce que je crois que c'est important.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Jörn. I bet this is a wealth of information that you got from the panelists today, and you can always, of course, follow up on the websites of all these inspiring projects and networks, see how one can join as an organization, or perhaps not as an individual, but as an organization, how you can connect with, if any of this is of interest for your organizations. Now, I would like to take few questions or comments or reactions from the participants and the audience, if there are any. We are quite a lot of us. Otherwise, I will keep on asking questions. If anybody wants to make a comment or ask a quick question? Yes, please. What I see from here are actually numbers. This is quite weird, but 69 it says on your...
I'm number 69. My name is Jörgen Christian Nielsen, and I represent PEN International in this session. But that's not my point. What I want to say is that we have heard all these excellent cases of networks and promotion of languages and literature and translations of all kinds. So how come that the European Commission has such a hard time promoting more translations, more books, more literature, when we have all these excellent initiatives? Can't they play together? And one representative of the European Commission said that as I got it, that they had difficulties in finding out how to approach this problem. So I think as for me, I got a lot of ideas for this. Thank you.
D'abord, je voudrais souligner qu'effectivement, parce que je ne l'ai peut-être pas assez fait, que ce projet est là grâce au soutien d'Europe Créative. Et si j'ai bien compris la question, il s'agit aussi de se demander pourquoi il y a tant de projets différents et pourquoi. Alors, moi, j'ai souligné non, pas du tout. Alors, en tout cas, moi, je sens à ce niveau-là, enfin, au niveau du développement du réseau, un soutien d'Europe Créative qui a parfois du mal à être repris dans les politiques nationales. C'est quelque chose qui est inscrit dans le principe de subsidiarité. Nous avons eu l'expérience d'un projet précédent qui a été soutenu fortement par l'Union européenne, la Fabrique européenne des traducteurs, et bon, le relais a duré un certain temps, mais s'est éteint. C'est une chose, effectivement, qui... cette articulation entre la politique du livre européenne et les politiques nationales qui reste un point sur lequel il faut travailler.
Anybody, if you want, I read this question as a question about the so-called policy dialogue. And there are many examples of how these networks and other networks, including the PEN International, are getting into a policy dialogue with the Commission. And we also just saw right now here in this hall a beginning of a policy dialogue by invitation of Alexandra. Unless you want to comment on that, anybody? Okay, yes, please.
This refers a little bit to a report we were talking about in previous presentation, and when we collected the data, that's true that it's quite difficult to get the whole picture, but from 20 countries who delivered the responses, the situation with the support, local support, national support for translations differs from country to country very much, but I would say that there are only 3 countries in Europe which gives more than €1 million per annum to support translations. France and the Netherlands and I forgot the other one, but in general, the support to support translations, it's in between €2,100 and €500,000 or even less, and we all understand that it can't save the problem. And also 5 million for literary translations from 40 languages into 34 languages sounds big sum of money, but it's 500 books per year. And I understand that the cultural budgets are national thing, but on the other hand, of course, we need to lobby as hell to increase these sums nationally and also in European level, because on Creative Europe system, if you know it, it's competition-based. We have to apply, we have to make huge packages of documents to get the money, then afterwards huge reports to justify our expenses, and this is good that this money exists, but it's hard-earned resources, and big applause to all the Creative Europe projects that helps this system. I think they deserve it. Let's do it now.
Yes, thank you. The next panel is actually about the Creative Europe support for the book sector, and I don't want to eat up the time for the next panel. So if there is a, yeah, okay, I'll take one last quick comment. Please go on.
Danke vielmals. Ahoi, hello, guten Tag. Ich werde auf Deutsch sprechen. Ich bin Martin Graffel und repräsentiere hier CEATL, Czech Literary Center. Wir sind sehr aktiv in vielen von den vorgestellten Aktivitäten und das freut mich sehr. Und ich muss sagen, mich freut auch immer, wenn ich sehe, welche Erfolge wir feiern. Meine Frage ist aber, wie weit bekommen Kenntnis über diese Erfolge die Politiker, die dann entscheiden, zum Beispiel auf der europäischen Ebene darüber, wie man literarische Übersetzungen unterstützt? Wir haben als CEATL eine große Mühe, eigentlich diese Erfolge beim Kulturministerium der Tschechischen Republik und bei der Regierung der Tschechischen Republik vorzustellen. Aber weil wir jetzt ein Gastland auf der Frankfurter Buchmesse 26 sind, sind wir irgendwie im Fokus. Also wir werden auf jeden Fall jetzt zugehört. Ich frage mich aber, wie wir oder Creative Europe oder CEATL oder ich weiß nicht wer, wie wir dazu helfen können, dass auch die Politiker auf der europäischen Ebene diese Erfolge sehen, aber auch diese Hunger nach diesen Aktivitäten, dass sie uns dann unterstützen. Danke.
If I may just say something, thank you, Martin. Martin is a great colleague in ENLIT. It's not really about making these successes known. It's about them being valued. I think there's a real kind of gap in politicians seeing these successes, for what they are, for the valuable contribution.
Thank you. If I may misuse the microphone, it's also about us in culture learning to articulate the arguments that will be heard, the arguments that will be understood by the politicians. That's a topic. Thank you for the comment. It's a topic for yet another conference. Before we wrap up, I would like to mention another network, that is not here in this panel, that actually the network that gathered us all here. And they, I don't know, out of modesty, did not have a presentation in that panel. But CEATL is not just a network, it's a network of networks. It's an umbrella organization of the Translators Association in Europe. And I would like to remind us all that CEATL has been instrumental not just in gathering transnationally the national translators associations, but CEATL accumulates substantive knowledge on the sector in Europe, and it also somehow throughout the years invisibly, I believe, has changed the way we, the politicians included, talk about literary translation and think about literary translation. In other words, CEATL has changed, I dare say, the discourse on literary translation. So that's really an achievement of a genuine pan-European network, and I personally want to thank them for that. So.